Welcome back. As we discussed last week, COVID is on the rise across the country and especially here in Florida. Look at this chart. These are the number of people who have died in the past 3 months from COVID, according to the CDC. Florida is well ahead of even California, which has almost twice the population of our state. And the overwhelming majority of those who have died were either unvaccinated or never got a booster shot. And yet, as we have pointed out, Governor DeSantis and his Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, proudly announced recently that Florida is the first state in the country to reject the new COVID vaccine. Last Sunday, I spoke to Florida's former Surgeon General, Scott Rifkes, about the dangers of that position. And this week, I wanted to discuss it with Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber, who recently wrote to the governor demanding he do more to protect people.
Even with this governor's history, I was flabbergasted by what he said and what he did. During COVID, he tried to stop, and he successfully stopped private businesses from requiring their employees be vaccinated, the Special Olympics, the cruise industry. But this is a little different. Telling people not to take a vaccine when over a dozen people are dying every day in his state, I think I thought it was craven, because frankly, he was doing it simply to help his campaign for president, and not because he cared about our residents. And I thought that was one of the worst things I've ever seen a public official do. Essentially, give people bad advice, deadly advice, because they have some other agenda in mind that they're following.
Why does this make good politics in his mind, do you think?
Well, listen, we are in an extremely divided nation, obviously, and his secret sauce is dividing people more and more and more, making them hate the other side. And right now, in Iowa and some of these states where he's trying to get votes from the base of the Republican Party, this might be good politics. I don't think it is, by the way, because I think people sort of recognize that vaccines are important in that they protect them. But for him, this may be a way to enlarge his base in places where he's hungry and I think probably desperate for votes.
You and I both recently spoke to Dr. Rifkes. We had him on the show last week. I know you spoke to him as well.
Well, remember, Dr. Rifkes was the Surgeon General under Governor DeSantis. It wasn't like he was from another administration. And he's a pediatrician. He's at Brown University now and doing public health, but I talked to him a lot in the throes of COVID, and I thought he was incredibly balanced and thoughtful, information-based. He sort of feels like the kind of doctor you'd want to have as your own doctor. And when you talk to him, he just sort of explains it in very simple terms, in a way that I think people should hear. So for me, I just wanted our residents to hear from a doctor who's just calling strikes and balls, and just says, this is what's going on, this is what you should consider doing. And all I'm telling my residents to do is, I think they should consider taking the vaccine. I did, but I think that they should talk to their doctor if they're not sure. Listen, the problem right now in Florida is that you have the person with the biggest megaphone and the greatest influence giving people political advice about a healthcare decision. And I don't know how anyone in the world can say that makes any sense at all. This is a medical decision. Talk to your doctor, talk to a doctor you trust, talk to a doctor who's calling it straight. Do not listen to the governor about this. He is not worried about you. He is worried about his campaign.
You and I have had this discussion before. So many people just want to put COVID not just out of their mind, but just completely out of any thought that they have going forward. And that's always the challenge here, the perception that COVID, that's something in the past. How do you challenge that? How do you fight against that?
It's interesting. I think about that a lot because, if 13 people a day die in Florida, if 13 people a day died in a mass shooting, we would stop everything to think about it and to do something about it. But somehow the fatigue around COVID is really something that I think is real. I think people don't really want to think about it. But I will tell you, though, that when you have it happening, you need to realize that you can stop it. A vaccine is the best way to stop it. And by the way, in the middle of COVID, I used in the video, and I always explain to people in the middle of COVID, when really people were coming into the hospital in Dade County at 400 a day, 4% of them had their boost. In other words, 96% of the people who checked into a hospital did not get their booster shot. So if you had the booster, there's almost no chance you were going to get really sick. 75% had no vaccine. So, it tells you that the vaccine means something. So I think people have to be reminded about what they need to consider doing to protect themselves and their loved ones. And you have to sometimes really, say it loudly. It just becomes so much harder when the governor is telling people something opposite. Honestly, Jim, I talk to people all the time, not sort of radicalized, partisans, but just people who don't know what to do. And I think that's because they're hearing contrary advice about something that they should not be hearing contrary advice about.
Well, you've experienced some of this yourself in the sense of you posted this on Facebook, and I know some of the vitriol that you've had directed at you as if you were saying something heretical. So, what's been the reaction that you get? Obviously, what takes place online isn't real. Twitter isn't real. Facebook isn't real. I think we need to move beyond that. But yet it does indicate just that level of anger about science, the basics of science.
By the way, I've gotten hundreds. I posted this video where, I thought I was pretty balanced. I highlighted and focused on Dr. Rifke's advice, and I thought it would be helpful to people to hear him rather than the current Surgeon General. I've gotten hundreds of comments. Probably 70% of them have an F-bomb in them, and or worse. And since it's a public place, I can't take them down. So it's there for everybody to see. But for every person who's just, I think, radicalized or just sort of nuts, there are a group of people who aren't, but are wondering whether they should do it. And that's the cohort we have to deal with, because you got to convince them that there's something there that they need to think about in an informed way. And look, when we have a hurricane coming at us, we tell people to evacuate, because that's what they should do. If the governor said, don't evacuate, and I said evacuate, I don't know what people would do. In an emergency, your leaders are supposed to get on the same page and give you the advice that you ought to be taking, not give you contrary advice, because then all of a sudden the marketplace of what people are, becomes confusing. And a lot of people, I think, are confused right now. And I think that's probably why Florida leads the nation in deaths and has the highest rate of hospitalizations.
This becomes their identity, is to be anti-vax, is to be anti-science. It's not even grounded in a belief system in something. It's just a skepticism about everything that has been engendered by a lot of politicians to not trust anyone, not trust the media, not trust science, not trust doctors. Because if there's no one to trust, then it's easier to lie to people. But it seems to me that that's a big part of the problem that we've got right now.
Yeah, and by the way, it's really, look, it's part of obviously politics these days. People who can become successful in politics by simply, creating as much and as deep, the deepest divisions possible, and reaching out to your side. And that happens about almost everything. We're seeing it play out in our public schools. We're seeing it play out everywhere. But when it plays out in healthcare, it has a different repercussion, because what happens is people don't do things that they should be doing. Here is the very sad truth about this. If the vaccine, if the boost is the best way to avoid getting sick and dying, there is no question that if more people took it, less people would die. So there are people dying every day in Florida simply because they're not getting the vaccine. And you're the governor of this state. How do you try to make that a larger number of people dying by simply telling people not to get the vaccine? It is so incredibly irresponsible. It's hard to even put words to it. And so for me, at least, I don't want my residents I don't want them to be confused. I want them to hear from doctors, their doctors, Dr. Rifke, and unfortunately, though, it does feel like you're screaming into a storm, because Governor DeSantis has unquestionably got the biggest megaphone in the state. Fortunately, and it's weird that it's fortunately, half the state probably despises him at this point. So maybe at least half of the people will take the vaccine because he's telling them not to. But what a horrible way to govern, right?
The irony is it's his supporters who believe him who are most likely to be affected by it and who are taking a risk of being hospitalized or dying as a result of following his policy.
No, and I think that's sort of proven out. Listen, before they stopped giving it to us, they would tell us the mortality rates in Dade County. And my city, I was very proud in the middle of COVID, had of the 10 biggest cities, had the lowest mortality rate. I really believe it's because they were following healthy practices. But I think Hialeah easily had the highest mortality rate by quite a bit. And I've got to think some of that is listening to the leaders they trust tell them wholly untrustworthy things about what they should be doing.